Good morning, everyone. This is the 11th of May, and this is the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee, and we're commencing at 9:01. I'll call it attendance. It's myself, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Fechner, Deputy Mayor Milligan, and Councillor Kunzelman. We have had some notification from Councillor Johnny and Councillor Madsen that they will be here very soon. I'll then ask for, Councillor Tully has requested to dial in via audio link. So while in accordance with section 254K of the local government regulations and in Council's meeting procedure policy, I move that Councillor Paul Tully be permitted to participate in the meeting via audio link. Do I have a second to that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Everyone in the room is, although, hey, Councillor Tully, this is to allow Councillor Tully to dial in. Okay. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Now, Councillor Tully, may I just do a sound check with you?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We absolutely can. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to acknowledgement of country. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the land and the waters we share. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, as the keepers of the traditions, customs, cultures and stories of proud people. I have no other apologies. Move on to any declarations of interest in the matter for the GIW. None, thank you. Business outstanding, we do have one item there. And Councillor Tully, this is an update on the matter taken on notice for the approval of clay mining. I believe, Councillor Tully, you asked a question about could the, if there was the approval for clay mining would be limited, so as time limited, so as development to occurs in the future, and refers to an email that came back to us on the 21st of April. I'll hand over to you, Councillor Tully. Have you read that?
I'm happy with that. That is self-explanatory, and I think it does indicate that even though they don't time limit the approvals, they time limit the activity, I think, from the way it's worded. So I'm more than happy with the what we've been advised. Thank you.
So you'll move that response. I'll second that.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the response? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chambers. Councillor Tully, how do you vote?
Yes, affirmative.
Thank you. That's unanimous and carried. Item 2 is the confirmation of the minutes for the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee of the 18th of April. I will move those. Do I have a seconder for those minutes? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any errors, omissions, amendments, corrections anyone would like to discuss? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Tully, how do you vote?
Affirmative. Thank
you. It's unanimous and carried. Moving to item 3, which is the IGO annual report card for 2021-2022. So it's a report concerning the results of the annual report card for the City of Ipswich Transport Plan. I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. I'll open that up for any discussion.
Can we speak to the relevant council officer, please?
Yes. May I ask the relevant council officer to come forward, please? Just your name and your job title, please.
Berto Santana. I'm the team lead for the Transport and Traffic team.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fechner.
I guess, firstly, just a question around the report card itself and why we decide to choose this format. It reads, to the general public that this is a report card on the whole of the IGO, when really it's just I guess it's a summary of the activities or projects undertaken the previous financial year and assessing them with, traffic lights, essentially. So I guess my question is around, is there anything in the IGO, that's screaming out to be done that we haven't focused on, or that should be a renewed a renewed focus? I mean, there's a list of projects coming up for the next financial year. What are the big ones that we're looking out for?
Thank you for that question. Look, I guess when it comes to this report, we do it on an annual basis, and the format that it's taken is been based on previous years. There are, I guess, areas that could be improved or could be expanded on. In terms of, I guess, what are some of the future improvements, with the report, you can see that we have quite a high vehicle dependency. We have a very large percentage of our mode share going to private vehicles and private vehicle trips. So therefore, what we really require is to have more sustainable transport modes and have choices for people to be able to go into, those alternative modes of travelling to work and so forth. So in terms of where we should be focusing is for those bikeway type projects, footpaths, those sorts of things that are giving people those alternatives for the future. So in the next financial year, my recommendation is that, we look at funding those as much as possible and into the future years as well, because that's where we're going to make the biggest difference. That also includes if there's anything, any improvements that can be made for public transport as well.
It is a pretty frightening report in places because, it speaks to the gap between what the local government is able to spend versus the needs and requirements, of our residents. And I know this isn't a space that traffic planners, engineers play in all too often, but, are we looking forward to maybe a focus on behaviour change campaigns to try and break some of those habits that we have out there? We speak to the car dependency. We know, with the development of the priority development area, with a lack of public transport accessibility out there, what it's doing to drive car dependency. Do we as the local government need to roll out behaviour change campaigns to really highlight alternatives for our residents to make those numbers move? Because it is quite difficult.
Absolutely, yes. So the IGO has a number of actions that focus on that travel demand and the behaviour change. We do undertake some of those and working with TransLink and working with other parts of council to change the travel behaviour. It is an area which we can save a lot in terms of future infrastructure as well, because if we can change some of that behaviour, it means that we don't need to invest as much in road infrastructure in the future. It also, I guess, one great example of behaviour change is the working from home aspect. As you can see from the report, the impact that working from home has had on our travel behaviour, and that is actually one of the targets that we have exceeded. It's effectively taking a lot of those private vehicle trips off the network, and that is having a very positive impact on the travel behaviour in Ipswich. So the more that we can do in that space, the better it will be for our future, both in terms of sustainability and also in terms of how much funding we need to provide for future infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. I note the final paragraph in the report talks about recent changes in travel demands that you're discussing with COVID and working from home. And when I look at table 1, we're seeing a decrease in public transport, which I think is happened because of COVID, but also a decrease in number of people walking and cycling, and the only real change are due to the work from home. So what can we do as council, but also obviously work with the state government very closely? They fund a lot of these programs for us as well. Do you have any advice for us on what we can do to shift those figures?
Yeah, look, one of the things when it comes to public transport, we work very well with TransLink at the officer level. And as a result, TransLink do put up proposed changes for services and various things that can be done. Unfortunately, we're not getting a lot of success in getting those approved by the TransLink board. So it's important that, as a local government, we advocate to the state, we advocate to TransLink that we need more of these sorts of improvements in the public transport services, because we haven't had many improvements in the last 10 years. It's actually been very limited. We've had some in some areas, but there is a lot more that we can do. And there are some areas in particular that don't have a bus service at all. So,
And what are some of the reasons Translink are giving us? Are there some things that we can do to address, or what are the
well,
reasons for not
mainly,
giving us the public transport that we need?
yeah, look, mainly, obviously we are competing for budget from right around the state. And often the needs in other areas sometimes, I guess, outperform perhaps some of our requests, but it is a budget issue a lot of the times, and maybe we can look at other ways that we can improve or get some of those services started.
And obviously, I think Transit will probably go from evidence, evidence-based. The fact that we're the fastest growing council in Queensland, does that come up in discussions with Translink?
Absolutely it does, yes. And, I guess in the state's positive steps that they've taken, they have given some services in the Ripley Valley area. But we also have a lot of growth in other areas.
I think that's developer funded.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also about servicing some areas that have had some growth that perhaps are not necessarily in, in the Ripley valleys of the world, that are outside of those areas that we could make significant improvements in.
And how does Redback Plains feature in those discussions?
Well, that's exactly one of the areas that features for us, and it does for Translink as well. We've been trying to get some improvements in that area, and we keep, I guess, advocating at the officer level and presenting the information as much as possible. But we definitely do need the political support in that space.
Thank you, Santana. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Can I just clarify, I guess, in the context of council advocating and the state looking at where services are needed, obviously the newer growing suburbs are an absolute given if we want to create behaviours of people catching public transport at the get-go. But I'm just conscious, representing a lot of the older traditional suburbs, services over time have been changed or cut, and absolutely understand that. It's often evidence-based. Just though with emerging, in the last few years of the NDIS, the disability and accommodation, that is seeing certainly within our division a greater need for public transport and accessibility. Is that something that council has been talking about with the state, or is it something that the state is aware of, these sort of infill developments popping up in traditional suburbs?
Yes, that is something that we discuss with the state. Where we contribute, I guess, positively in that manner is through our improvements to bus stops, through the Disability Discrimination Act compliance. So we can get some improvements to that, but we also still, I guess, we need to go further in also allowing people to be able to get to those bus stops. So some of the infrastructure around some of those bus stops is not as good as it could be to cater for those sorts of people. I think there is an acknowledgement by the state that some of those inner areas definitely need improvements, but it is, I guess, the aspect of the budget, which is also the limiting factor in a lot of that.
Yeah.
Translink do want to do positive change, and so do we. It's just being able to actually get those pieces of infrastructure over the line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just thinking about some of the challenges, Mayor, and potentially a discussion for us to have around the investment that we're making in sustainable transport projects. I'd like to see us build in some sort of education to those projects that we're rolling out. We're in a bit of a tricky place, I guess, with the sustainable transport network, in that some key elements of those connections are missing still. But as they come online, it would be nice to see that those communities surrounding those links would actually, be aware of that. So those people that live in Brassel, inevitably, when we finish the link across the river here, could be broadly, a broad education piece to let them know that, you have access to this. If you work in the CBD, if you're ever visiting the CBD, if you're able to, these options are available for you. Likewise, as we roll out the link ultimately to Brisbane, which is a slow-moving project, but grateful the state government have been 50-50 this whole way, paying for those bike links. As new additions are made, as we increase the distance, those surrounding residents to be aware that, that's available for them, and we're building it for them to showcase that there is an option. I think that it's been a bit of a missing link. Often you hear, and I experience it myself, when you're travelling a bikeway, the Brassel bikeway comes to mind, how underutilised, such an important and beautiful piece of infrastructure is, and that's the perfect example of good forward planning and investment in this space. But is it that residents just aren't aware that that's available for them? Do they know where it terminates? I think that we could be doing more in that education space, to see the dial move a little bit further, because it's tricky, and this, report outlines, the dangers. I mean, it doesn't even go into the fact that we're only just now really becoming aware of our obligations to remediate our assets. So there's going to be significant monies needed to remediate existing assets, let alone that, planning for the future growth and being able to invest in new infrastructure. It's tough. So I look forward to this IGO review. And, I hope to take an even broader strategic view of what we can reasonably achieve, and have that open and honest conversation with our residents and with other levels of government about where we're at with our planning and what our major priorities are. At the moment, there's some good work being done on some small discrete projects within the IGO strategy from 2016, but the world is a lot different now. Things are more expensive, money's more tight. So I think that the more that we can drill in and articulate what our asks actually are, the better off we're going to be as a local government. So, I think that we can learn a lot from this report, and really stretch our minds to think, well, how are we going to positively influence transport connections in our city moving forward with this new IGO review? It's a really, really good opportunity for us to think about those things.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, because I look at the fact that obviously the state government and the council are spending tens of millions of dollars on the bikeways, and we're not seeing that lift. As someone who obviously cycles a lot, what do you think, if I could ask you, what do you think would be practical things that we could do to improve, increase the number of cyclists?
Increasing comms,
Okay.
And potentially partnering with organisations like Bicycle Queensland for a renewed energy and a focus. I think some of those, smaller activities can amount to piquing someone's interest enough to tip them over to consider what it looks like walking around their suburbs and making those connections. Also helps our residents advocate for themselves if they think, well, hey, my connection isn't that great. I live close to a school, but I don't have access to a footpath that can get me there. Then it helps them feed into the process of the decision making that we do every year come budget, and where we're investing the ratepayers' dollar. So I think education's a big one, and empowering community, which is tough, and definitely keeping the dialogue open with the state government, because without them we don't have that significant investment, and a joint strategic view of the network is absolutely needed. It sucks that demand equals investment in some cases, because you get to a point where the service is so pared back that people can't access it, or it no longer becomes viable for them. So, looking at a piece of paper, well, we're not going to invest money in there because no one's using it, but no one's using it because we're not investing in that. It's a really vicious cycle, and I think that, we'll continue to have that open conversation with the state. We've got it listed as one of our strategic priorities to try and improve services out at Red Bank Plains, and that's something that we're all very passionate about. So let's see how that works out, and then apply that advocacy, to other priority areas across the LGA.
Thank you. Any other discussion? In that case, I put that the report be report we received and the contents noted. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Tully, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, which is the citywide FOGO core collection service, and there is 6 recommendations there. And this is a pretty important one for our city as we become more sustainable and adhere to the targets set by us by the state and federal governments. But we're looking at adopting a food organics and garden organics service citywide there. So I will move the recommendations A through to F. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Jonick. May I have the relevant council officer come to the lectern, please?
Good morning, Kay Kavanagh, General Manager, Environment and Sustainability.
Right, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
In our very new division on natural environment and sustainability. Just been through the report, thank you very much for this. And I can see here in table 1 that we have an obligation to divert council waste or municipal waste from landfill, and we have targets such as 55% by 2025 and up to 95% by 2050. If we don't go to a FOGO service, can we reach those targets?
It would be very difficult to reach those targets if we don't move to this service. The latest waste audit demonstrated that around just under 50% of our curbside bin, the red bin, contains organic materials. So this process is to try and get those out of the red bin into a green bin and processing those rather than taking them to landfill. So.
Okay. When we had the 12-month trial, obviously we had very high contamination rates. Yes. I think somewhere around that 30%.
Around 30%, yeah.
Yet our neighbours in Lockyer, I think around a 2% or something like that, 3%.
Yeah.
What are we going to be doing to address that?
So we've demonstrated when we've moved back from, that was with the weekly organic service, and we were getting the high contamination rates. When we've moved back to the fortnightly service, which is what we have with our current opt-in, we've dropped back down to about 5% contamination.
Right.
So there is that change in behaviour, and we'll also be having a lot of education programs to support the community in keeping that contamination down.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. Any other questions?
In terms of signalling the market, is this enough lead time for those operators that we use within the LGA?
It will be to move into the 24-25 financial year. So realistically, coming to council now will give us that opportunity to work through our contracting and market analysis, but also working with the community in the education program to roll this out as a core service.
I would hope there have been discussions prior to us seeing this today with the market to see what their capacity is, and certainly from a state government perspective, they've been involved in those conversations looking at what the capacity is.
Yeah, there's been conversations probably over the last 18 months or more, particularly at the regional scale. So as part of the South East Queensland Council of Mayors, there's been a lot of conversations around the movement towards a full FOGO service.
Thank you. On page 37, it talks about some additional waste assets so have those 6 additional FOGO soil lift collection trucks been ordered, or are we waiting on this decision?
We're waiting on this decision, and then we'll be able to move towards that ordering, yes.
And how is a FOGO truck different to a normal waste truck? Is it different or the same?
The truck itself is the same, but the body, the compactor, is different. It's a stainless steel body to prevent that corrosion from the organic materials. So it is slightly different, yes.
Okay, thank you. This is Councillor Johnny.
Through you, Chair. I just wanted to congratulate the team for the proactivity and the forward planning and forecasting and modelling for this. It's not an easy shift in our business as usual, and obviously the climate that we are in, we've experienced issues with truck ordering, etc., and getting this out and getting it in front of us so that it can be built into future budgets prior, modelling the financial impacts and taking in all of the scenarios as best as possible. I really appreciate the time that's taken to do that. And I know that you guys are very busy.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, the waste manager apologises that he wasn't here today because he would have liked to be able to present on this report, but they have done a lot of work and looking at that financial modelling as well. Yeah.
I checked out the background of the reports and all of the assumptions with Mr. McAllister on Monday, I believe, and it just really puts my mind at ease that there's so much thought being put in right here at the start and projecting out to a 10-year period as well.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. And we talked about the waste diversions is a really key driver for this, but it is also those cost implications with the waste levy and the waste levy rebate changing over the next 10 years or more too.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms Kavanagh? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move into discussion. I don't know at the paper that obviously there's the council's working through the city deal with ComSec on securing the $10.2 million. That was part of the city deal. But I also note too, by doing this service too, that we are also looking at, about 130,000 tonnes of harmful carbon dioxide that could be abated. So we'll be able to apply for other grant schemes through the federal government as well. So I think apart from it's going to be a better environment, but it's great to see the state and the federal governments have those grant mechanisms in place to subsidise this as we look to roll it out. Any other discussion? No? Oh, okay. I'll put A through to F to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Tully, how do you vote?
Affirmative.
Thank you very much. It's unanimous and carried. The next item is on-demand curbside large item collection service. And we have 4 recommendations here, but basically looking at changing the way, rather than doing a every second year bulky collection, curbside large items collection, moving it to an on-demand annual collection. And that would be free of charge, as it would be included as part of people's rates notice. I will move this. Do I have a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Can I ask the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please? Ms Kavanagh, how are you?
Hello again.
This is a very much loved service in Ipswich, the
is.
bulky curbside collection.
Yes.
Has this approach been done elsewhere in Queensland?
It has. There's a few councils that have implemented this, Gold Coast being one, Townsville as another one, and Redland that I believe as well.
And is it an annual one where there's no additional fee for the resident?
Yeah, so that would take us from our current once every 2 year program to an annual program with a free service for every household per year. Yep.
Okay. And obviously we've asked questions about what happens if someone wants to have a second one picked up, and you'll come back to us with what those costs would be.
Yeah, we'll look into that as part of the tendering process, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
No, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Fickner?
Noting this is quite a significant departure from what the city's been doing for decades, probably. Councillor Tully could probably attest to that. Are their comms ready to go today on this? I think that it's a pretty big change. It'll have some significant interest from our residents to understand and unpack what this might look like. So just wondering if we're ahead of the curve on that.
We've commenced preparing for those comms already, so in preparation for a decision today and next week. So yeah, it is underway, but that will be something we'll have to ramp up pretty quickly, because it will be something the community will be a bit of a shift from the way that they've done it over the last 20 plus years, in that every second year putting it out on the curbside. This will be ordering a bag, having that delivered, filling the bag, and then getting collection.
Councillor Tully's got his hand up.
Oh, okay, thank you. I missed that. Councillor Tully?
just a query to Kay. In paragraph C, it says for a second only service. Does that mean a resident could only get one other paid service, or would we offer more than one? And if it's more than one that they're paying for, should we say an additional service or services?
Yeah, good point. We haven't investigated that at this point as to whether that be one extra or multiple extras. The one thing we just keep in mind, I guess, is council also offers skip service, so it was about balancing the types of services that we offer to our residents. So that would be something we'd have to explore a little bit further and understand what those cost implications might be for residents.
Yeah, I'm happy with that, but yeah, some people might have, yeah, they don't need a skip, but they probably might pay for 2 extra services. But if we keep that in mind, I think what's important is that this is just will be subject to an ongoing review, and how it's used, and yeah, you know, how we explore opportunities in the future to refine it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point. Yep.
Thank you. I think Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I just, you know, as Councillor Tully just pointed out, this will be subject to ongoing review, and I would hope, and I believe we need the constant ongoing education with residents around this. We know that initial education may get lost with some residents, so I'm just concerned that perhaps new residents to Ipswich and those that have missed the original comms won't be aware, and we'll need to manage that. So I just believe ongoing regular communication around this particular service will be really, really crucial to the success of the program.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point as well, because it's not just a set time in the year. This is an ongoing service that a resident can book at any time during the year once it's commenced. So it's not like, you know, this April will be coming to your front yard. It could be they want to book it in October or a different time. So yeah, that ongoing comms I think will be really important.
Yeah, and can I just ask practically, have we thought, and we obviously have thought through, if for instance an entire street take up the option, almost an entire street, and some neighbours who aren't as educated on the program put their stuff out on the curb, how are we going to manage that?
Yeah,
I can see that occurring, and possibly some angst in the community around that.
And I think that'll have to be really strong through our communications, particularly initially, what this transition is from the previous service that we've offered to what this new service is about booking and filling a bag and then getting the bag collected. So I think that's going to be a bit of something we'll have to manage in the initial phases, and whether that's something we'll have to have a potential backup service just to respond to those. But hopefully through our comms and engagement, we can limit that.
Yeah, it's something I'm sure you can confirm we saw during the floods, for instance.
Yes,
trucks
yeah.
going around picking up, and then there would be additional waste.
We tend to see what our neighbours are doing and think, yes, I agree. Yep.
Yeah, we all lead busy lives. So.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Cosman.
Just to follow up on that conversation, if I put mine out in my bag and then my neighbour puts theirs out without a bag, what will we do?
That's where I think we'll have to just monitor that moving forward, because the bag will be delivered and collected by a contractor, but they won't be responsible for collecting if someone puts out on the curb. So we'll just have to manage that, how we would respond to those types of matters, yeah.
Thank you. I think Councillor Deputy
Thanks,
Mayor.
Mayor. Mr Cabinet, we would also need, I would assume, effective comms with regards to contamination. So currently, you know, you can't put gas bottles, LPG gas bottles, refrigerators containing refrigerant, tins of paint, other toxic materials in. What would be foreseen as the direction if that occurs at a rate that is impacting the service?
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point how we would manage that. We'd have to work with the contractor that we've engaged to understand what those contamination levels are. through the website and the comms that we would have, there'd be really strong terms and conditions that would outline what types of materials you can put into that container. So hopefully, we can limit that contamination, but yes, it would be something we'd have to work through with the contractor as well.
Thank you. I note here that we know from other councils that the move to this, we will be able to recycle more from this, and I think it says that moving to this, it looks like we could be achieving that 80% resource recovery. What is it now with the current way that we do the curbside collection?
In the current service, there is no resource recovery. It is all
all?
taken to landfill. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it's a big improvement from a recovery perspective. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms Kavanagh? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess as we move into discussion, I note that there's a number of recommendations saying that council officers will be coming back to us. There's a lot of terms and conditions that we wish to discuss. I know when we've had our workshop, we've discussed some of the terms and conditions that the Gold Coast have had, such as once you've ordered the big bag, you have to have it removed within, I think, about 4 weeks or something like that. Otherwise, there is a fee and things like that. You don't want to have people ordering the bag and then it's sitting out there for 6 months and so on. So I think as those terms and conditions come through, we'll communicate that back to our residents as well. If there's any other discussion or comments that anyone would like to make? Yes, Councillor Donny?
Just through you, Chair, I think, I guess the positives out of this are it is on demand. So, that fear of missing a curbside collection every 2 years is taken away. And so with a lot of families in the area and the older community as well, they've got that ease of ordering when they've got what they need to cleared out, and that 80% aim of resource recovery as well. So there is a lot of change here, and there's going to be need to be a lot of education, but I think there's some great positives that we need to highlight here.
Yes, Councillor Fichtner.
Loving the theme of today's committee and resource recovery. It feels like on demand is similar to the FOGO instance this morning. We don't have an option not to look for alternatives at this point. We're not living, our strategic direction to divert waste from landfill. The current situation is untenable. With 0% resource recovery rates from the, every other year curbside collection is a horrendous outcome for the environment and for our people. So I think picking up on that in the comms is really important. But also for council's financial sustainability, we need to move, to this model. So we're thinking about doing things differently. We're thinking about living through our resource recovery strategy and our transformation directive and all of the positive steps that we've taken forward. These are two really complex, decisions that we're talking about today that have been raised to us, raised to this level, so that we can continue to move forward and get better outcomes for the environment. So I'm really supportive of the on-demand service. Can't wait to see, I believe they're blue bags, can't wait to see the blue bags, lining the streets and people getting around that service. I think when you think about what it might mean for, people who aren't home at the time of collection or those who need a little bit of assistance, it gives you lead time to rally your community to come and help you to fill your bag out the front. So I think there's lots of social benefits, to this and to our residents to be able to book this on-demand service. So, I speak in support of it on so many levels for the convenience of our residents, for the financial saving to the local government, but ultimately the absolutely amazing outcome for the environment in trying to increase those recovery rates.
I agree, Councillor Fichtner. I think it's a terrific step forward. This is a really exciting step forward, not just the FOGO, but this change in the curbside collection. We know that people do like that bulky curbside collection. This is, I think, a really positive step forward. We are now going to be recycling most of what comes in. There was none of that happening before, so it's a better for our environment, but also better for us economically as well. It's going to be a more efficient service. And I think to the fact that there will be no charge to the resident, so very cognizant of the cost of living impacts. And also in discussions in our workshop, we've had the discussions about what happens if there's a renter and that address had been picked up earlier in the year. Well, in those terms and conditions, we're still teasing out those to make sure that everyone's proportionate. So if that is the case, they can have that address and things like that. So very excited about these two new ways of us being more efficient and making sure that we do our bit in reducing landfill. This on the discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous in the chamber. Councillor Tully, how do you vote?
Affirmative, and I need to leave the meeting now, Mayor. If, with your
Okay. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Just note that, Councillor Tully. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is the Infrastructure Environment Department Capital Delivery Report. May I have the relevant council officer come to the lectern, please?
Good morning, Graham Martin, Acting General Manager of Asset and Infrastructure Services.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Thank you for this report, and again I'll highlight the fact to residents that there is a great update in there with including pictures of our capital projects being done, so thank you very much. I think that's fantastic. I guess I'm talking about the communications. Obviously we've got a huge capital works program that we're doing. How are things going with communicating with our residents to say, hey, this road that you travel on is getting an upgrade? How's that going?
I think our communications, we probably need to break down into a couple of different sectors. I think some we're doing well, and there's some that we need to make some improvements on. So I think when we're out there in the construction phase itself, I think we do that well. Perfect? No, but I think we do that very well. Probably the area we need to improve is in the pre-planning and the pre-work area, where it's probably the first time the residents are seeing us coming out, and maybe the first time they hear about the project, and we're moving into their space and have some, I guess for the officers, they've got decisions made they want to progress with, and probably not communicating as well as we could with some of those early stages and the early engagements. That in turn then leads to, I guess, a bit of a loss of trust with the council because we're not getting that communication right up front. Puts us a bit behind the 8 ball then as we then move into the construction phase itself. So that's definitely an area we need to have a look at, that pre-planning. It's not a gentle approach. I guess that's not quite the right term, but it's certainly getting in there and advocating some of the reasons why, not just the here we are, this is what we're doing. So that's an area that we do need to have a look at as part of the improvement across the organisation and continually working towards better service for the community.
And how are you finding when we go out to tender, what's the market capacity like? We've heard that there's supply chain issues. Is that still occurring, or is that softened? Or?
No, we're still finding it some difficulties, and it is still a little bit irregular. There'll be some projects we'll go out and be struggling to get the numbers that we would expect. We're seeing that a little bit now as well with some of the early tenders that are going out for the flood recovery works as well, that we're getting limited number of responses come back. Again, some of the larger projects we're getting good responses, good interest in, so at least there's some initial interest. Not all of the contractors are available on the timelines that we have. So it is a little bit of a mixed market out there still at the moment. It is something moving into next financial year. We'll need to make sure we keep our planning moving. Some of the decisions, particularly on some of the larger projects, we're just making sure we're keeping cognizant of the impending infrastructure that will come in with the Olympic builds, the Coomera connector, although it's well outside of our area, will absorb a lot of resources, physical resources and people resources and machinery. So we're just got to make sure that over the next year and the year after that, that we're keeping things moving, getting out early to the market.
So how are you managing that? How are you mitigating that?
It's making sure we get out to the market as early as we possibly can. It's also we're engaging with industry groups, not contractors individually, but as industry groups, to get some feedback from the industry groups. What sort of contract formats would they like to see, as an industry. What are they comfortable with? What are some of the contract formats that they'll use outside of Ipswich to make us an organisation that is easier to deal with, so that the reporting, the specification reporting, contractual requirements, they're very comfortable with, so they don't see that as a risk of doing business with Ipswich. So it should, and we're really comfortable that that will allow more people to come into the market, put less risk pricing into it. The other part we need to do is be a little bit more flexible and understanding of the timelines, which we're working on now. Sort of one of those things that, as the owner of the contract, you know, we have a timeline. Same thing, we talk to the residents. We want to get in on a certain date. We get traffic permits to come in and do night works and, you know, disrupt people's lives. The contractor has a delay, it gets pushed back by a week or a month. We need to be flexible with the contractor, but at the same time, we've got to get back to our residents and let them know what's happening, why we're having delays and where.
So, Mr. Over the last few months, when I've seen when contractors have either one turned up early,
Yes,
and residents haven't been notified, or the work is delayed. Hey, we're coming out next week, and they don't come out for another month. What mechanisms do you have to ensure that our contractors that are delivering this work for our residents are giving more accurate information to our residents?
we have the contractual mechanisms in there, but it does become, when their programs change, it's very much a manual and a personal update. So it is getting on the phone and talking to us, making sure that they're calling us when their plans have changed, when their own resourcing capabilities have moved. They're trying to be flexible and nimble and all of those things to maximise so they don't have a lost day. And we need to try and get that notification as early as possible. So it's continuing the contractual relationship that we have, certainly making sure we move away from any sort of that master-servant adversarial type contracting and continue into partnering type contracts, certainly not alliance, but partnering type contracts, where we can accept some changes within limits. We have our restrictions as well, and we need to make sure that our residents and our prime needs are met as well, but having a little bit of flexibility for people to move as circumstances change. But it is very much reliant on individuals from both sides having the relationships, being able to communicate.
I guess it's just really important. I mean, residents want the road upgrades. It's just they also need their, as you know, some of those ones where they've had a job fall through, so they've come early, and the first thing residents know at night time, hearing roadworks and stuff. So
yeah, absolutely, and it's something that we are talking about amongst ourselves, that, you know, the job that we perform in the capital delivery is by nature disrupting people's daily routine. Hopefully it's for a short time, for a long-term benefit, but it does mean if we're ripping up a footpath or we're doing some stormwater drainage, we're doing some roadworks, we are stopping people doing their normal daily commute to the shops, to the schools, to work, whatever it may be. So we are making sure we continue those conversations amongst ourselves and remind ourselves as engineers, it's not just a matter of knock it down and go forward. We have the social fabric around us as well, that while we're improving it, we need to work with the community and lessen the disruption as best we can. And again, advise people early of what that disruption may be so that they can plan their lives around it, not just the physical planning on a day-by-day basis, but also to consolidate within their own mind what's happening, accept it and be ready for it.
thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ireland.
First of all, Mr Martin, thank you. Everything you've said, you've explained to the divisional councillors, so it gives us a heads up of where the phone calls may come from. But I'm just wondering, in your carryover projects, 2 bridge rehabs, you're doing a design on them. Does that mean you're going to replace those bridges, or is it just resealing the surface?
Generally, it's looking at whether we need to upgrade or replace. So is there the structural capacity within those bridges to keep the pylons that are already in there and widen or broaden or whatever is needed? Or are we at the position where it's an older, I'll use the example of a wooden bridge, does it actually need to be replaced and removed? So a lot of that, it'll be the structural integrity of what's there already in that rehab program. Generally speaking, if it's in the rehab program, then it's leave in place and upgrade, unless we find something where the foundations have deteriorated and we need to pull it out to upgrade the capacity. It may have a reduced load limit on it already. So it'll be that design about what's the structural capacity.
So if you do find, after you've done the design, that it's going to be replaced, we'll apply for the bridge renewal program for them?
Yes, so quite often we'll, one of the reasons we'll put a load limit is so that we can tease out the life as long as we possibly can until we can get that funding help, because the bridges obviously are quite expensive. Some of them are in sort of low traffic volume areas but are key connectors, so we've got to make sure we get that balance right. So yeah, when we do get the funding, generally it's sort of like a 40% contribution. So if we can tease out that life with a lower load limit, while it's an inconvenience for a couple of years, if we can get that extra funding, then it's a huge benefit to us overall.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Finger.
At any one time, how many projects do Capital Delivery have live across the LGA approximately?
On any given day, depending on the size of the project, we would have 20, 30.
Yeah, and it's a leading question, and I only ask because, you know, there was lots of questions and commentary around that stakeholder engagement, keeping our residents on board, and I know that it's at the front of your mind. You know, does the resourcing in stakeholder engagement correspond to being able to actually fulfil that need to be more proactive in that space? Do you need more support from us?
Our engagement with the residents is increasing from where it was a few years ago. So we're increasing the engagement that we're doing. So we will need to keep continuing to engage with and employ some more stakeholder engagement people within the team. And we go through some ebbs and flows where, depending on the project and the types of projects, we have some projects that are very intensive with the engagement, and they're probably the ones we need that extra resource or two, you know, when you've got to do that planning and that strategic look ahead, as opposed to the, so why I think we're pretty good on the actual construction phase is because we're in there and it's moving and people are ready for it. It's having that time and capability up front to be able to stop, plan and really assess how big is the impact, potential impact, and having time as well on our end to understand some of the responses we get back from the residents, and that can be a little bit time consuming is not the right word, but you've got to take on a fairly subjective view of it, not just an objective view of what are some of the responses, and maybe read between the lines a little bit. So definitely we will need to continue to lift in that area, and then build the capability within some of our project management teams to continue that engagement piece. We've had some feedback and looking at how we can possibly put in a central contact point who is a reference point throughout the project, but at different life cycle, times in the life cycle, we'll have some different individuals who will touch base with the residents, but there is one continuum running through it. So we're looking at how that could work, and it's a change. It's certainly doable. It's a change for us, and we'll work towards that.
I'm always keen to see what improvements we can make to strengthen the contractual obligations for engagement in that space. So is that something that we're reviewing to make them stronger, to be more prescriptive to our contractors who are out there in the wild and what we expect of them? I know it's a double-edged sword because we've got to have someone internally managing that, but do you think that that's, you know, an effective way of kind of managing emerging issues as well, by putting the onus on the contractor and really partnering with them?
Yeah, I think it's the double-edged sword. So yes, there's definitely some advantages in doing that, and it just brings more resources to the party to make sure it happens. What that does though it puts the external contractor in charge of the comms. Some of the other examples out in industry broadly across the region, they have long-term contractors that have had 3, 4, 5 years of the headaches to sort out what is the level. So, you know, we use our contractors, the road surfacing contractor, Redbank Plains road upgrade contractor has requirements in there for the notifications. So yes, it helps. We still have to have a very close, again, that relationship, contractual relationship with them to make sure that if they do have that swap where they came in and did some road resurfacing at night, they changed their mind from Friday afternoon to Sunday night, what does that mean for the communication? So yeah, it's definitely something that we need to use because resources everywhere are limited, and the best use of those resources, if we can contract them in, need them on a contract, they can disappear again, then again, that doesn't leave us with that potential liability of long-term FTE creep.
Are there potential, I guess there might be potential drawbacks if there were to be penalties contracted to these people, but, you know, if the contractor is, you know, seriously out of line and they're not fulfilling their obligations, you know, are we having those difficult conversations? Are they penalised, or is it just keeping the peace at the moment?
No, it's not keeping the peace. We definitely have the difficult conversations, or the not even difficult conversations, the real conversations that are required. We don't have the systemic ongoing abuse of our trust or our contractual obligations. We have a project, then it will run well, the communications will run well for a month, 2 months, and then we'll have another one. So it's not that we have a systemic and ongoing problem where we need to get into that contractual dispute and apply penalties, but certainly it's a constant conversation. This is our expectation. This is our expectation. Drop the ball on this one. You know, we've got to get back on track. This is where we have it. So yes, we do have those, I guess you call them contractual conversations with them.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you. So I shouldn't have gone to discussion, I haven't moved it yet. So I'll move this, that the report be received in the consent. Thank you, Mr Martin. Do I have a seconder on that? So thank you, Councillor Fechner. So I'll now move into discussion. No, there's no other discussion. Thank you. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Move on to item 7, which is the exercise of delegation report. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officer on this one? And in that case, I will move this report be received and contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Move into discussion. Any discussion on this report? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's carried. Move on to item 8, which is the Planning Environment Court Action Status Report. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please? Yes, my monthly questioning. Yes, Councillor Fechner. But we have some movement at the station on one item. Sorry.
You're right. Good morning. Anthony Bowles, Acting Development Planning Manager.
Thank you, Mr Bowles. I'll go straight to the matter. There was obviously the judicial review. There was some, do you mind outlining for residents?
Yep.
What the, I guess, the outcome is? What does that mean for council and for residents? And what from now on, what happens?
Okay. Yep. So what happened was on Friday, essentially the decision was made on the judicial review applications.
On the Wanless matter?
Yes, for the Wanless matter. Yep. So essentially the appeal was dismissed, and what that means is the judge ruled in favour of the minister, in that the minister essentially is able to continue with the process of the ministerial designation. Okay. There are further hearings. There's a hearing today, and the hearing relates to applications to put a stay on the minister making a decision on the application. Okay. Until such time that the appeal period for the decision issued on Friday is completed. So what that means is, or what the next steps are, is that any of the parties are able to appeal the decision and make it something to be heard at a higher court, and that would be a continuation of the discussion. Alternatively, if that doesn't occur, the minister is able to continue the assessment of the application.
Okay. Is the minister able to continue the assessment of the application while the appeal process is happening?
There wasn't originally a stay on the first orders preventing that, so no. But today we'll basically decide the next step of that to prevent it from continuing. So, in a way, given the decision's been made, there's a bit of a gap in time where technically the minister would be able to continue the assessment. But today, this decision and the applications will be heard where the stay may be continued. But that'll be something we'll know later on today.
Okay, thank you. On the matters of the land track, that's just the BMI and the cleaner, those matters that we took to the Planning Environment Court that obviously we've been waiting since August 2021. Is there any movement on those matters?
Unfortunately, we'll have to continue to wait. No further information about that at this time.
Would there be an impact noting some of the decisions councils made today, and obviously the obligations for all councils and industry to reduce landfill? Will those things assist us in that court finding, or once the courts they don't take any more evidence, that's it?
That is essentially it. No, so the judge has essentially been given all the evidence he can consider during the hearing, and this has happened after that point. Okay. So unfortunately, no.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Probably my last one would be the one on with New Grow. About council's decision to refuse that DA, and it says without prejudice discussions ongoing. The matters listed for review yesterday. So how did that go?
I'll have to check that, but I understand that I haven't actually got an update from that hearing yet. Okay. But I understand we're still exchanging information with through the without prejudice process.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any others. Thank you, Ms. Bowles.
Thank you.
So I'll move that this report be received and the contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. There are no notices of motion. There are no matters arising. Since it's 10:04, I will move that the next committee, which is the Governance and Transparency Committee, commence in 30 minutes at 10:34. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. I'll put any discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And is your hand up, Councillor Kunzelman? Yep. Those for, so it's all councillors except for Councillor Madsen. Those against, thank you, Councillor Madsen. So we'll come back here at 10:34. There are no procedural motions or formal matters, so we'll end this meeting now at 10:04. Thank you.